In this video, I want to take you through an interview question that I think is fairly interesting because when you first see the problem, it seems impossible to solve. But once you know what sort of solutions are available, it suddenly becomes fairly easy. So we've got some criteria here. So we need to generate a report, and we can generate anything from 1,000 to 100,000 reports a day. So the first thing we know is that this thing needs to scale to some serious capacity. And each report can take 10 to 90 seconds to generate. So these could be reports with a lot of data in them. And of course, we're not allowed to lose any reports. So a report has to be completed on that schedule. And we query an external data source. So we might have a data source here that is something like Amazon Athena, or we might have some sort of database as a service. And we've also got some information about the infrastructure here. So our application is horizontally scaled, so that's good. We can receive a kill signal at any point. So we know that our application is probably running on something like a spot instance. And once it receives that kill signal, it has 45 seconds to shut down. Okay, so we can see a serious problem here. Reports can take up to 90 seconds, but if we receive a kill signal, then we have 45 seconds to shut down. So what happens if we're 10 seconds into generating a report that's going to take 90 seconds and we receive that kill signal? Well, then we might lose the report and we're not allowed to do that. And this is not the only responsibility for this service. It's also doing other tasks. And so this is interesting because it tells us that we need to find a time to generate these reports where this service is at its lowest capacity. So this is generally probably midnight. And we need to distribute the load. So we know this is horizontally scaled, and we need to distribute the load of generating these reports across several different instances. So if you want to have a go at trying to solve this problem, now's a good time to pause the video, go draw out an architecture that you think might work, and then come back and watch the rest of the video. And if you're not already, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's free, and I very much appreciate your subscription. Okay, so let's draw out what we know this infrastructure looks like currently. So we have an application layer here, and inside of that application layer, we have a single service that is running several different instances. So we might be running Kubernetes, for example, and then these might be different pods with our application running in each one. So let's say for now, we only have 3 instances of the service running. And then we also know that we have a database. So let's draw that. And I'll just label this database. And let's give this a label as well. So I'm going to call this app layer. Okay, so what is the solution here? So what is the first requirement? Well, firstly, we need to tell our system, hey, it's time to start generating reports. And the best way to do that is to set up a cron job. So let's say over here that we have a cron. And our cron is going to run at, let's say, midnight. So what could we use for this cron? Well, there's several different options. We could use, say, a Kubernetes cron. We could also use a HTTP request and use an external service that's going to send that. We could even just set up a cron file on the server, but that's not going to work because we're horizontally scaling here. So let's determine what we're going to use a little bit later. So when our cron hits our application, let's write some notes here of what it's going to do. So 1, the cron is going to hit the app. And then what happens when our cron job hits the app? Well, it needs to determine what reports to run. So it's going to determine reports to run. Okay, so now we're up to this step here. So what happens when we have all these reports that we know need to be run? So we have all these reports that we know we need to run now. How are we going to distribute that load across all of our services running on the application layer? For this, I'm going to use a queue. And when I say a queue, I don't mean just a queue data structure. I mean a service like AWS SQS. And the queue is going to have 2 jobs. Firstly, it needs to produce messages. And then secondly, it needs to consume and delete messages. So once we've determined what reports we're going to run, we're going to create a message on the queue for each report. Okay, so now we've created a message on the queue for each report. We now need to start consuming those messages back off the queue. So let's diagram that here. So let's say I'm using SQS. Now I'm going to start consuming those messages off SQS. And because I'm using SQS, I may as well use that as my cron service as well. So let's say we're using SQS as our cron. So I'm going to have a couple of different queues here. One I'm going to have for our cron, and then the second one is going to be for our reports that we need to run. Okay, so we've created a message on the queue for each report. Now what do we need to do? We need to start consuming the messages. And when we consume a message, we're going to run the report. So we're going to generate report. And when we're finished generating the report, we need to delete the message off the queue. Okay, so what if we run into this scenario here where we're 10 seconds into generating this report that is actually going to take 90 seconds? So what's going to happen is we're going to say disconnect from our queue. So let's make another list. This is going to be gets kill signal. What we're going to do is we're going to disconnect from SQS. So we're going to say to SQS, hey, this instance of the application, so let's say it's this one here that's got the kill signal. This instance can no longer receive any more messages. If we have a query running to our database, we can terminate that query. And then finally, we can shut down the service. So we've got to this step here, we've got to step 5, but we haven't got to step 6 because we've shut down the service and we've disconnected from SQS. And so what's going to happen is SQS is going to say, hey, you had 15 minutes to consume this message off the queue. You didn't consume it. I'm going to try this again. And then on the queue, we should set a retry limit. So let's say the retry limit is 5. And then after 5 attempts, if the message doesn't get received, it's going to go onto the dead letter queue. And then when a message ends up on the dead letter queue, we're going to get notified. And that means that there's something wrong with our system that we need to go fix. So this is how I would solve this interview question. If you have a different answer, let me know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.